Sanibonani Dumelang. I am your host, Kululwa Mutwa, and welcome to this episode of Property Market Moves. Now, in this platform, we aim to inform you, educate you, and inspire you along your property journey. If you're a student who is studying towards property, or just someone who is interested in property as an investment, or you are in business and property, this is the platform for you. Welcome. And in this episode, we are speaking to Gregory Mofokeng. Now, some of you will have known him in his former life as the CEO of the BBCBE and currently the Vice President for Business with the Black Business Council. And he's also a businessman himself, chairperson of TISUS Group. Welcome.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. So before we kick off, we all know that, we will know certain individuals in the roles that they occupy. But it's important to know, the person behind, those roles. Who is Gregory Mofokeng?
Well, Gregory Mofokeng is, a man that comes from humble beginnings in the Val. So that's where I was born in Everton and spent my formative years in the Free State in Kwakwa. That's where I spent my formative years attending school there and then came back to finish my high school in the Val and started, of course, rejoining my parents after the experience in Kwakwa. So that's me in a nutshell. I started, at an early age. My parents were both in business, and my dad used to run a panel beating shop, and I used to work for him during school holidays and weekends. And that's where I think the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and that's when I knew that I wanted to be in business and not be someone else's employee forever.
Sure. And I think with that, this question that always, becomes a debate, business people or entrepreneurs, do you believe that they are born or made?
I think they're both born and made. And I think, you have those entrepreneurs who just have entrepreneurship in their blood. It doesn't matter the background they come from. You will find that they make a plan. Some, of course, come in as running survivalist businesses, but the entrepreneurship is there. You can see that, this person is really not made to be an employee. They are made to make a plan, and sell whatever it is that they can sell for a profit and sustain their lives. And I also believe that entrepreneurs are also made, because you find guys that take a very interesting journey in their lives where they start off as professionals and later on then realize that I can actually do it in business because they've been exposed to the networks of people that are in business, and they've also studied, in areas where it's possible for them to be able to start that journey as entrepreneurs.
Okay. And in your journey, what have you found probably to be the key ingredients of making it as a business person? So if I'm starting out a business, what would I need to learn and learn very quickly?
It is actually the softer side of things. I learned that in my journey, the most important thing was actually the networks. That was the most important thing. You can know whatever you know technically, but if you don't know the people that can make it possible for you to enter the right doors and the right rooms and have the conversations with the right people, you're not going to succeed. So for me, that was the most valuable thing as far as my business journey is concerned, being part of networks that make it possible for you to access people and resources that ordinarily you wouldn't have access to if you're not part of those networks.
Sure. And speaking of networks, and I know that there will be networks, in some of the formations, like the likes of BBC and SAIBPP, but there's also then what you need to do when you are in a room, with people. And I find sometimes that we go to events and we say we want to network, but we end up, gravitating around the people that we already know. How do we network?
Well, you can't always network with the people that you know. You already know them. So the value that you can extract from them is you have already done so. So you do need to expand your networks and get to know new people. One of the things that is also critical is who introduces you to other people. So when you are attending these networks sessions, conferences, indabas, and so on, and there are people that you think will be critical to your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If you don't feel comfortable approaching them yourself, talk to someone else that you think might have closer proximity to them, and let them introduce you to them. Because it's also important that people take you seriously because of the person that introduced you to them. So it's very important that you also explore that approach as opposed to only leaving it up to your own devices. Sometimes you do need help from others to facilitate those introductions, even when you are in the same room with those very people.
Yeah. And what is the value of being part of organized business if you are in business?
The value is quite immense. And I find that as Black business people, this is something that we don't prioritize. I often say that if you go to the smallest town in the Free State or in the Northern Cape, you'll find that a retail business there that is owned by a white person will belong to a SAIBPP, a business chamber of white people. Why? Because they understand, the importance and the significance of belonging to a group. Because even when you are in that setting, as an example, you are running a retail shop in a small, a town called Tuileng or Paris in the Free State.
Yeah.
You can't just have access to the mayor. You can't. You have to go through this formal structure so that you can have access to the mayor and have formal discussions about how the local government there can play a role to enhance the environment within which you are operating. And I think that lacks with Black business people. I think the view is that these organizations must just be there. They must just exist, and when we need them, they must be there to do what they need to do to assist our businesses. And I think that's a wrong approach. So it is important for our Black business people to understand that it is important to belong to an organization.
Yeah.
Not only that, but to be active in that organization, to attend meetings, to contribute ideas, and also to contribute financially as well. Because these organizations must survive. We must have offices.
Yeah.
We must have staff. So those things, do require money, and that money can only come from membership as a primary, source of funding for the organization.
And when we, let's talk about, the BBC. And we know that, the BBC now is an organization that represents, Black business across. And I think, firstly, about BBC itself, and also looking at comparing, the property and the built environment industry as opposed to other businesses in terms of, advancement. How are we growing as Black business in the broader economy of South Africa?
Yeah, so, in the country, we've got two what we call confederations.
Yeah.
The one is the Black Business Council and the other is Business Unity South Africa.
Yeah.
And of course, BUSA represents, traditionally large white-owned businesses. And our role as the BBC is to make sure that we create an environment that is conducive for Black businesses, to survive and also to thrive, and be able to look at how we can impact the structure of the economy. Because the fact of the matter is that as Black people, we are still not there when it comes to ownership of the economy. So we do need to temper with the ownership of the economy. And, there are various ways of doing that. One is through making sure that there is appropriate legislation in place, and to also unlock other levers such as funding and so on. So the BBC has got that mammoth task, of trying to make sure that we do change the structure of the economy and the makeup of the ownership of this economy, because it is clearly not representing, the demographics of the country.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to get to make sure that the ownership profile and the management profile of this economy reflects the demographics of the country. So that's where we need to get to. And if then one looks at the different sectors of the economy, and one looks at the built environment and the property sector, I think we are making strides there, but we do need to up the tempo. I think a lot of people have come into the sector, and they've tried to entrench themselves in the sector. There are still those structural impediments that are there, especially for meaningful participation of Black people, women in particular, as well as youth. You do find people that are still excited about the industry, but we do need to help them. And I think the only way we can be able to help them again is to look at what kind of policies that are applicable in this industry that can then assist them, right, to come in, to run sustainable businesses and to grow those businesses to be large businesses, so that we get away from this thing of saying Black businesses are small businesses. I think we need to change that altogether. Black people can run large businesses, and they must be given an opportunity, and the environment must be conducive for them to do so. So there's a number of levers that we need to tinker with so that can be made possible. And I think, in this growth journey of Black entrepreneurs in this sector, we do need to look at what is it that we need to do to assist them. One of the issues, of course, is access to information about what's happening in the sector. It's very critical. If you want to come into any subsector of the property market, you need to know what is happening. How do I get hold of this information? How is the information packaged so that it can be useful to me as an entrepreneur? And number two, which is absolutely critical, is funding. People need to have access to finance. If you don't have access to funding, you don't have a business. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So some of these things we need to really come up with clear strategies as to how we are going to address them. And as you know, the issue of funding has been an issue that has preoccupied the likes of SAIBPP, the likes of BBCBE, for the longest time. And I think, at some point we really do need to be serious about what are the solutions to this thing. We can go and knock at the door of the NEF, we can go and knock at the door of the PIC, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we do need to come up with a solution that says this is the institution that is going to be funding Black people who are playing in this sector. And we all know what the rules are, and there's no confusion around that. But also, we need those institutions to also have a developmental approach to things. Because at the end of the day, when you're an entrepreneur, you're expected to have a balance sheet. Nobody cares where you get the balance sheet from. It must just be there. And I think we all know our history. We don't have to repeat our history. We all know where we come from. If you're a youngster coming from a township, there's no way you're going to have a balance sheet. And therefore it's unfair for us then to say, but you're an entrepreneur, where's your balance sheet? So the approach should be, how do we assist you to create that balance sheet? And I think that's where we need to find each other.
Sure. And I think this conversation, we know that transformation, probably we can all define it in any number of ways. What would transformation look like for you when we've achieved it?
The ownership and the management of the economy must reflect the demographics of the country. That's transformation for me. If you are saying this country, the population, Black people constitute 90% of the population, 90% of this economy must be owned by Black people. It's as simple as that. When we look at the management of entities, when we look at the management in the public sector entities as well, they must reflect the demographics of the country. That's how I define transformation and the end state as far as transformation is concerned.
And now we know that government is one of the biggest procurers, of services and goods and services, actually, and stimulator, of businesses. Are we doing enough?
No, we're not. We definitely are not doing enough. And that's why the likes of the BBC, the likes of SAIBPP, and other organizations continuously put pressure on government to do more, to do better. One of, obviously, the latest pieces of legislation we are busy with is the Public Procurement Bill, where we are hoping that it will then empower public sector entities to do more to empower black people. The concern has always been that the existing legislation in the form of a triple PFA does not empower right people to make those significant decisions to procure with black entities. So we are hoping then that the new legislation that will come in will empower them, to do set-asides for women, for youth, and so on, so that we don't have this excuse that has always been there for the longest time, that the law does not permit me to do this. And of course, we don't want our people to do illegal things. So if the law is the problem, we need to change the law. And that's where, the focus is at the moment. But also, we need to change the attitudes of people. And I think that's the softer side of things that we always forget. That even when you have the law, you still need somebody to implement that law. Now, if the mindset of that person is not about empowering, about transforming the economy, they will not do it. They will just do the bare minimum because that's what the law permits. But the law is simply a framework. On top of that framework, you can do a lot of things. And I think that's where we also need to spend a lot of time trying to make our senior public servants aware that we need them to be bold. We need them to be courageous so that they can be able to implement these programs that, as the private sector, we look at government to implement so that government can empower us in turn. So I think that's where the next challenge is going to be. Once the law is there, we need people to implement that law. And we don't want people to do the bare minimum because, well, it is what the law says. We want you to do more because the law will permit you to do more, but you must have the courage to do so.
Sure. And what is our responsibility, as black people, as black business, in empowering ourselves and each other once that law is in place? I think beyond having that courage, do we have the will?
And that's a problem again, that we don't have the will. But here's a point that I forgot to make earlier, that one of the political will that we must have as South Africa is to make sure that transformation does not only happen in the public sector procurement space, that transformation must also apply in the private sector. Absolutely. As well, because I find that our focus is so much on the public sector. We forget that actually the biggest actors in the economy is actually the private sector. So I think this is something that we need to do. I mean, if you travel on the continent, you'll see that governments on the continent have the courage to make laws. And so in the private sector, you'll have to play by these rules. If you don't play by these rules, there will be consequences. And I think we need to get there as well, because every time we talk about transformation, we only look at government. What can government do? We now need to start asking the private sector to say, what are you going to be doing to also make sure that the economy is transformed? So that's absolutely critical that we need to get that right. And once you get that right, you will then be able to get even black people who are in the private sector doing the right thing. Because if you look at the codes, the BE codes, and you unpack all the pillars, you will actually realize that everybody can actually benefit from triple BE because you start with ownership. You come to skills, management, enterprise and supply development. You go all the way down to corporate social investment. So theoretically, everybody should benefit from this.
Sure.
Right? Now, we are not all going to be owners of businesses. Let's be clear. Right? There will be those who are fortunate enough to own those businesses. What we expect them to do is to then do the rest of the other pillars so that others can then be able to benefit. Once you are the owner, we expect you to promote black people in your business. We expect you to spend money training black employees and those who are not even employed by your company, because that's what the skills development pillar says. We will even reward you and give you BE points for training people who are not employed by your company, because we are all aware that we need to do more to train for the economy, not only for your company. And all the way to CSI, where we are saying even our communities must benefit. So it does not only end with ownership when you are the owner, but we also expect you to go into the community, look at those NGOs that are doing fantastic work for the community and see to what extent can you support them materially so that they can be able to continue to service and make the difference in those communities. So ideally, BBCBE touches everybody, but it is the will to make sure that it's implemented properly that lacks.
Yeah.
And we need to hold each other accountable as Black people as well. Because if we don't, then transformation just becomes one of those things that white people must do. But we, as people that have now graduated to that different class, are not doing what we are supposed to do to make sure that transformation actually touches those below us. So we must hold each other accountable.
And when you look at, we're now 30 years, into democracy. And I think I read or listened to a video, and they were talking about, what got us here, which is the history that, the colorful history of South Africa, which was, over 100 years. And we cannot expect to right the wrongs, of that regime in a 30-year, period. But when we look into the 30 years of democracy, and maybe looking into the next 30 years, what would we like to see?
Well, look, the fact of the matter is a lot has been achieved.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of missed opportunities as well in the 30 years. I like to take the approach that says it was an experiment, right? We experimented with a lot of things, and we now know what works and what does not work, all right? And for instance, we all know that we have very good policies, but the problem is that we don't do so well in implementing them, right? And so when we look at the past 30 years, this is the experiment that we have undergone as a country. We now know what works. We now know what works. We also know that we're not going to stand and by the wayside when corruption happens. We have to be actively engaged citizens and say no to corruption. So all of these things, I look at them as the experiment of the past 30 years. And going forward, I look forward to a South Africa that is determined to do better. I look forward to a South Africa that says, when there is a law that we have all agreed to as a country, that this becomes the law, it must be observed by everybody. If you don't observe that law, we must deal with you decisively. And I think once we get to that stage where we can implement our laws the way they were meant to be implemented, where we can hold people in power accountable, when something goes wrong, we are able to stand up and say, this is wrong, and we want you to correct it. I think that's how we are going to change the South Africa that we currently have in the next 30 years, to make sure that it is a South Africa that works for all of us. We have a very beautiful country. We've got fantastic infrastructure. We've got wonderful policies. We've got wonderful laws. Let us just do right. And I think the experiment of the past 30 years has taught us that we need to do things better. We now know better.
Okay. When we look at the two commissions, and I'll talk specifically the competition and the BE commissions, and I think the competition commission, we know its power, we know its bite. What gave it that power that the BE commission has not been able to have to this point?
It is the political will. It is the political will that was there to say, this institution can be utilized to transform the economy. And that's why we even went into the amendments of the Competition Commission Act to give the commission those powers that are necessary for it to undertake its business in such a manner that it can then engender transformation on the other side. And if you look at what is happening now with all the measures that are going through the Competition Commission, nobody's questioning anymore the issue of having to prioritize transformation in the measures that are going on in the economy, and we need to get there with the BBCBE commission as well. Of course, initially people had a problem with the new powers that were given to the Competition Commission, but now people know and understand that this is absolutely necessary. So when you go to the Competition Commission and you say, I want to merge with this company, the Competition Commission will ask you, what are you doing about BE? In the past, it was not there. Now it is there. And people know that even before they go there, they must have a plan around BE, so that when they do get there and they are asked a question, they're able to present a plan. And the plan that must be, cogent enough to convince the commission that indeed these people are serious about transformation. And we've seen a lot of opportunities flowing out of the competition commission process to actually allow new entrants, guys that have been existing in those particular sectors for some time, to actually now start acquiring real assets and play a very significant role in those particular industries where those mergers and acquisitions are happening. We now need to shift our focus to the BBCBE Commission and say, okay, to what extent do you want to give the Commission real powers that will then hold people accountable?
Yeah.
At the moment, there's confusion in that space, right? We know for sure that the Commission does not have the necessary capacity. They don't. I mean, we are seeing cases that have been referred to the Commission 2-3 years ago. They are still not yet finalized, right? Now, we can't have that. We simply cannot have that. Their own act and regulation says they must finalize the case within 18 months, but they are unable to do so because they simply don't have the resources. Now, we need to look at the minister and say, Minister, why is this commission not being given enough teeth? Why is it not being given enough resources to do its work? All right. Now, we don't want to start questioning whether our government is serious about transformation or not. All right. So what we do expect is that when we say this is the mandate for the commission, we must appropriately capacitate the commission to undertake its work. Right now, if you do stumble upon a case of fronting, for instance, the commission has to get involved. But with the current lack of capacity in the commission, those people can get away with murder, literally, right now, because there's just simply no capacity to deal with issues of corruption as well as fronting when it comes to BBCBE.
Sure.
So we do have a serious problem. So we do need to have the will to sit down and look at the commission and see to what extent we give them real powers so that people know that there is a real deterrent out there. If you don't play by the rules, there must be consequences.
Yeah.
There has to be consequences.
As a businessman, I'm sure you have had, ups and downs. What lessons have you learned from the downs?
Patience. Sometimes you just have to be patient. Sometimes you just have to be patient. As entrepreneurs, we're always in a rush. As entrepreneurs, we want things done now.
Yeah.
Yet we interface with a lot of stakeholders in our businesses. They might not be going at the pace at which we are going. They might not be seeing things the way we are seeing them. So we need to be patient to allow people to understand and to see things from our own perspective.
Yeah.
So I think patience is one of those virtues that as entrepreneurs we have to inculcate in ourselves because we're always in a rush. This must get done. This must get done. But the rest of the world does not sometimes move at the pace at which we are moving. So I've learned to be patient.
And at what point in that, patience trajectory, do you make a call that it's time to walk away?
Oh, you will have to make a call at some point, and that is something that you will get to a point where you see that things are just not moving. All right, and you'll have to make a call at that point to say maybe I should look at something else, or maybe I should employ another strategy here because the strategy that I've employed is not getting me to that desired destination. But it's something that, as a person that is an entrepreneur running your own business, you will know that no, at this time I don't think things are going the way I expect them to go.
Yeah.
And it then requires a change in strategy and tactics. Yeah.
And do you think that as a country, we're doing enough to train entrepreneurs?
We are not. We are not doing enough. We definitely are not doing enough. And I think one of the areas which I feel that, because we can have curriculum, right? In school, you can have curriculum, and there's entrepreneurship degrees that we can get, and so on and so forth. But business is about doing. You can learn a lot through material that you read. You can write essays and do all of those things and do your masters, but you've got to be in that business. You must do something for you to be able to appreciate the nuances of business. And I think for me, what we need to do as a country is to factor in mentorship a lot in what we do, because yes, we can teach people about entrepreneurship, but you need to have those that have traversed this road before to be able to guide those that are coming behind. So no, you don't do it this way. You do it this way. Funny enough, I was sitting in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with one of the young ladies that is wanted to get into business, and we were sitting in a formal meeting, and we were sitting with this gentleman who is obviously a potential client, and we were just having a nice conversation, and you could hear the tone, from her in terms of asking questions, that the tone was not right, all right. And after the meeting, you sit there down and say, no, you don't ask questions that way. You ask this way, because if you ask the question using this tone, the other person does not feel comfortable, or, and then they don't give you what you're looking for, because they just think maybe you're too aggressive, So these are the nuances that we need to really impart to the youth that are coming in, and because you can give them all the material to read, but until they can walk the journey, until they can walk the path, they are not ready. They must still walk the path. So we must do more to mentor, our youth, so that they know how business works, and business is a whole lot more than what is in the textbook.
Well, that was quite informative. That was a mouthful. Now, as we wrap up our episode, we have a question for you.
Okay.
Now, this question was written by the guest that we hosted before you. And when they write this question, generally they would not know who is going to be on that seat.
Right.
So the question goes, how would you go about ensuring that infrastructure investment in South Africa embraces tech and innovation with proper foreign direct investment as opposed to foreign entities pledging, this handwriting, but use, as opposed to foreign entities pledging, but use funds from our IDC, DBSA, etc. So how would you go about ensuring that infrastructure investment in South Africa embraces tech and innovation with proper foreign direct investment as opposed to entities pledging but using funds from our IDCs and DBSAs?
All right. So let me look at the question in two broad strokes.
Yeah.
The first one being innovation and tech, and the other being to what extent does this pledges actually come in a form of foreign direct investment, but when it lands here, they actually use our money here.
Yeah.
Right. So on innovation and tech, I think unfortunately the infrastructure stroke construction industry is always very slow, right? To uptake latest tech developments and innovation. But I think the speed at which we are moving now with 4IR and moving to 5IR now, I think we are definitely going to have to increase the tempo in terms of looking at what is happening globally and to what extent we can then implement it here at home. The influence of foreign players in the local market also has an impact, because if you look at what is happening in China, for instance, where they've been delivering infrastructure, at an exponential rate for the past couple of decades, a lot of innovation has gone into that, and so we need to say, how do we then adopt that back home? Yes, we do have a problem of high unemployment. Yes, we have a problem of people that are not necessarily skilled in this latest technology, but we should still be able to move apace with the world. We must not find ourselves way too far behind the curve. So I'm hopeful that as we interact more with global players, I mean, we've got Chinese companies now operating locally, and these are the same companies that have delivered fantastic infrastructure in China, in the Middle East as well as Europe. So I'm hoping that interface will allow us to absorb and adopt these innovations and technologies and apply them here, whilst at the same time we're investing in our people to make sure that our people, are able to play a meaningful role at that in the application of these technologies, and then we can then be able to absorb as many of them in the construction industry. The construction industry does lend itself to a very good job creator. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, we do need to adopt technology and be able to move with the rest of the world. Of course, there are benefits to that. We are able to reduce the time that it takes to build the infrastructure. We are able to build infrastructure that is, fit for purpose in certain areas of the economy. So there are benefits to these things. We cannot just say, we don't want to embrace technology, but also society at large must embrace innovation and technology. One of the things that I always critique is, IBTs, where you find that we can build our houses using modular systems, we can build our houses using renewable, systems and so on and so forth. But you find that our communities are not ready for that. All right. And this is another area where we need to educate our communities, make sure that there's awareness programs to say, no, actually this technology is as good as brick and mortar, because people just believe that brick and mortar is a thing. If my house is not made up of brick and mortar, then it's not a proper house. So we look at society at large and to say, to what extent does society at large adopt technologies? Because that then means that the people that are coming out of those societies will be readily available to adopt other technologies in the sectors within which they operate. So I think we need to work on that side, and the country has to open itself up to adopt technologies that are coming from other worlds. As much as we innovate, others are also innovating. We need to learn from each other. That exchange must happen. Now, in terms of the issue around foreign direct investment, is very interesting, because one of our successful program now is this renewable energy program. And everybody is very excited about it, that it has worked. We've invested over 200 billion rands in that sector, and so on and so forth. But when you look at how it was sold to us, it was sold to us as a program that is going to benefit immensely from foreign direct investment. But when you scratch, you then see, no, the bulk of the money actually came from here. Is it the money from IDC, DBSA, the local commercial banks, PIC, and so on? So it's a lesson, I think, that we need to learn, to say, guys, we do have the means to fund these things. We don't only have to rely on FDI. We do have the means to fund these programs here. So as much as, yes, we do want FDI, I think we must also recognize that FDI can actually be blended with the funding instruments that are available locally. And that should actually make us play a much more significant role in those projects that are going to be implemented, because we're also coming up with our own money. We are not only relying on FDI, but we do have our own money here. And as we invest our own money, we should then demand more in terms of things such as transformation, in terms of things such as skills and knowledge transfer, and so on. So yes, I do agree that people come and they make pledges and say, hey, we're going to invest so much. But when you look at it, they are only bringing a very small percentage of that funding. The rest of the funding actually is going to be secured locally. And so we need to do more in order to extract better value out of the money that we are investing in these projects that are funded as FDI funded projects. But in reality, actually, the bulk of the money comes from us.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end of our episode. Thank you for your time. I trust, as you are listening to the podcast, that you have indeed been informed, educated, and inspired as you move through your journey in business, whether it is in property, built environment, or any other business, space. Thank you. That was quite informative. And now we're going to have you write a question for the next guest that is going to be coming.
The guest I don't know.
Yeah, the guest that you don't know. But yes, to our listeners, please do follow our podcast, like, share, subscribe, because as we are better educated and informed, the better we can show up and play in the economy of South Africa. Goodbye.